Good evening. Welcome to New Horizons, and welcome any new faces. Well done, fantastic turnout. If you do have a mobile phone, if you'd like to put it on silent, please, thank you. Right, a massive welcome to Andrew Johnson with climate change and chemtrails. What is happening in our skies? Andrew Johnson tonight invites us to check the evidence and set aside belief as we look at climate change, which is what we cause. Nah, only joking. And we'll pay for. Not joking. What are the drivers out there? Is someone messing with the weather? Andrew points to a phenomenon a lot are unaware of still, that of the chemtrails, as a possible weather modifier, or not. Highly alarming cover-up now starting to be uncovered. Please welcome Andrew Johnson.
Thank you very much, Rob. Thanks very much for inviting me back, and great to see everyone here tonight, and thanks very much to everyone for coming, of course, particularly those that have come a long way. I've got a lot of information to get through tonight. I think there's 170 slides, so I'm probably going to have to skip over some, like I don't doubt. Basically, I just sort of a couple of introductory remarks. I'm on YouTube. I'm on checktheevidence.com, as you saw. I'm on Facebook. People want to contact me, get extra information, send me stuff. I've got DVDs there. DVDs 50p each. I've got one copy of my paperback book, which you can download for free. Got an audio version of it. It's about 9/11. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about 9/11 tonight because that comes into this picture. I've got 2 copies of Dr. Judy Wood's book, having just got a new shipment a couple of weeks ago. So if anybody was after a copy of that and couldn't get one, by getting it from me tonight for £25, you're saving on the postage, which costs a £5 to post it, because it weighs 1.5 kilograms, £3, so it's heavy to post. So I've got that here with me tonight. So I'm going to start with this. Let's see if this works. You might need to tweak the volume on this.
I'm bored. What plaything can you offer me today?
An obscure body in the SK system, Your Majesty. The inhabitants refer to it as the planet Earth.
How peaceful it looks.
Most effective, Your Majesty. Will you destroy this Earth?
Later. I like to play with things a while before annihilation.
So, of course, that's all just science fiction, isn't it? That's from, if anybody didn't realise it, Flash Gordon from 1980. And one of the things I mention is if you watch that film again with, perhaps what you've learned over the last few years of you looking into this stuff, you'll spot a lot of Masonic symbolism and things like that in that film. Quite a lot of it. So that might seem like a frivolous thing to show, and it might seem like science fiction, but I think by the end of this presentation you'll be given pause for thought if I've put the information together properly for you, that is. So what I'm going to try and look at, may have to skip over some of this, but this is the goal at this point. We're going to look at chemtrails, evidence hidden in plain view. We're going to look at aircraft traffic and trails, and this is my investigation, which is new, because I did present this a version of this presentation a few years ago, but since then I've done a bit more investigation and come out with at least some bits of useful information, let me put it that way. We're going to talk a bit about weather modification research, because there is weather modification research and it's quite a long history. We're going to mention Wilhelm, Reich, Orgone Energy and Cloudbusters. I'm going to try and cover that. We're going to look at evidence for weather modification in action, which I think is getting, to be honest, it's getting pretty obvious right now, certainly to me. I'm going to look at psychological operations. And was that film itself, the Flash Gordon film, a piece of predictive programming? Possibly it was, having an earthquake machine or a machine that can trigger off volcanoes. Now, I'll mention right now, I don't think HARP is, half of what people would blame it for. Not even a tenth. It's too public. So, I'm going to mention HARP, but I think you should just more or less forget about HARP, except to know that it's real and it's a defence installation. I don't think it's the cause of any of this stuff. It's too public. We're going to look at disinformation. So that's quite a substantial thing as well in this. We'll mention briefly legislation which explicitly mentions weather modification and or chemtrails. And we're going to look at the weather control which was used on 9/11, which is probably one of the only areas that, well, I'm about the only person, and Dr. Judy Wood, maybe one or two others, will talk about weather control used on 9/11, or the inference that is that. Almost nobody will talk about it, not even anybody who talks about chemtrails. They won't talk about 9/11, and I've got a very good example of this, which I'm going to play towards the end, which came up in the last few weeks. So, what is chemtrails? Well, maybe one or two in the audience don't know what this is. It comes really from the sort of contraction of the phrase chemical trail, the words chemical trail from aircraft. Some people prefer to use aerosol or persistent jet trail, as chemtrails are often automatically, if you use that word, you're a conspiracy theorist, I'm going to laugh at you, not going to listen to you. And this phenomenon is real, it's not theoretical, it's something that anybody can observe, given enough, a couple of weeks. You'll see it a couple of weeks, once or twice within a couple of weeks. Thought to have begun to appear mainly in the 80s and early 90s, although we have got video and photos going back further than that, of something which might be called a chemtrail. One of the ones that's become a little bit notorious is at the end of the Italian Job, which I think was made in '69, was it? The Michael Caine version, that is. There is actually a chemtrail or persistent jet trail right at the end of that, if anyone wants to look out for that. And I went and got the VHS tape to see if it had been added, and it was certainly in the VHS tape version of that. But there's actually very little direct information available, as I've come to argue the case, outside your own observations. A lot of the stuff that you read on the internet, it's basically unverifiable. Some of it I think is unproven. But I can show you that disinformation is actively being put out. And I think if that is the case, which it clearly is, something is being covered up. I'm just not precisely sure what it is. Just to mention some of the other researchers, I've corresponded with one or two of these people. Clifford Carnicom, he's got a good website. He's got quite a lot of good information. Rosalind Peterson, who promotes global warming and all that stuff, so I've got a little bit of doubts about her, but she's also collected a lot of documents about some of the US Air Force research into weather modification and things like that. Phil Morris, he did a bit of research. He's dropped out of the picture a bit now. He was from Cheshire, but I think he's moved now. Went out to Israel and then came back. William Thomas wrote a book in the mid-90s. Wayne Hall has been active in Greece. I've corresponded with Wayne a few times, good guy. He's tried to put the issue before his local officials and bring that up to a sort of national level in Greece. Made a little bit of progress in that area. And then Scott Stevens, the former Idaho weatherman, he's also put together quite a lot of information, although again, surprisingly, he won't talk about 9/11. And then another chap that I've corresponded with more recently, who's been quite a strong activist on the issue, is Max Bliss, and he's been driving around Europe in his van, which has chemtrails written on it and aeroplanes and painted on it and things like this, saying stop chemtrails. And then you go onto Facebook and there's loads and loads of groups, a lot of people are aware of the issue, but I think a lot of them, are not so open to new information as I would have hoped. Now, let's get one thing clear about contrails. Basically, what comes out of the back of an aircraft is a contrail. That's all you should see. Now, contrail comes from burning of kerosene. Kerosene is a hydrocarbon. It mainly contains alkanes, which are made up of carbon, approximately 85%, hydrogen approximately 12%, and there are some other compounds like a bit of sulfur, various other bits and pieces, and there is nitrogen and sulfur, approximately 1% or 2% each respectively. Now, when kerosene burns, therefore, it can only form compounds that contain elements that were originally in the kerosene or in the air that it burns in. Not surprisingly then, the main components that form when kerosene burns are carbon dioxide, this alleged greenhouse gas. You know, you can all chuckle to yourselves if you want to believe that, but there's a whole other, well, I'm going to mention a bit more about that, but I know it's been talked about here on several occasions. Sulfur dioxide, in small quantities, that's a toxic greenhouse gas which mixes with water to form acid rain. Sulfurous and sulfuric acid, that's H2SO3 and H2SO4 if you want the chemistry. And carbon monoxide, which is a toxic flammable gas, that's CO, one carbon atom, one oxygen atom. Toxic flammable gas, and it's responsible for some deaths which happen when the gas heating equipment is faulty. And then you get water. So in other words, you're mainly going to get carbon dioxide and water. And of course, when the trail of water is in the upper atmosphere, it's about minus 40 degrees centigrade, and so it freezes to form ice crystals, and that's the white trail that you see. But when we look at each of those compounds on the previous slide, water, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, they're all colourless, right? So when kerosene burns, it would seem that the only visible thing we should see in the sky is the condensation, which, like our breath on a cold day, should disappear in a few tens of seconds or even a couple of seconds. And indeed, when a jet takes off, we can only see colourless compounds come out of the back. All we see is the hot air, you know, you can see the refraction, and you get that sort of shimmering effect like you see on a tarmac road on a hot day. That's the change in refractive index of the air, if you want a bit of the physics. So here we're going to see a little clip which I stole from Scott Stevens that he made a few years ago, and I'll have one or two of these later in the presentation. This is slightly peculiar. I've just looped it, as you can see, a couple of times, because you've got an X here of two trails that have gone perpendicular to each other, so that they're staying, and this one is not staying. So why is that staying and that one disappearing? And when you get down to it, there's no particularly good explanation for this. Now, people will say, well, Andrew, it's because that plane is at, 37,000 feet, and that one's at 32,000 feet, so there's different layers of moisture in the atmosphere. So one leaves a trail and the other one doesn't. But when you start to try and pin people down on this, it all becomes a bit more vague. And I don't really know what the good answer is. It's unusual that the one that persists is in the form of an X, and the one that disappears is just a straight line. And we're going to explore this a bit more later in the presentation, but that's just a starting point. Something odd is going on here. Now, again, you'll see people saying, well, chemtrails, it's just all contrails, just forget about it. It's just all contrails. Because we saw this started in the Second World War, B-17 bombers over Europe, 1943. You'll see this picture posted and read. Look at all these trails. Lots of ordinary persisting trails. Contrails, these are, no such thing as chemtrails. This is a fairly typical statement. But look, what we're talking about is something that happened over 60 years ago. Aircraft engine technology has changed a lot since then. The composition of the fuel has changed a lot. I think now we're on JP8 jet fuel as a standard, when it's gone from JP1 to JP2, and they've changed the mixture of the fuel. I'm not going to talk a lot about that because I don't think it is important, but it's not as important as some people make it out, I would say. And these things were deliberately flying in formation because they were on a mission. So there was a reason for them flying in formation. And I guess many of you have seen these grids. How do we get those grids? I'll talk a bit more about that. I'm just going to show you a quick selection of photographs. Some of these are quite old, and basically because I haven't, some of them are old, some of them are new. I've updated it a bit. I could update it loads more. 2004, what causes this? Battle Creek, Michigan. Can't even say it, Michigan. Just flick through these. February 18th, 2003. That's a typical one. I've got some of the links here. Noughts and crosses grid. A bit more interesting one where we're getting these being seen from space. They are appearing on satellite pictures. This is a bit more inexplicable. This was from Jeff Challenger's site, And he argued that there is so much material here, it couldn't possibly all have come from, from jet trails. I mean, where did all this mass come from is the question he asked. Well, I don't know. There's definitely something very odd going on. This is actually an interesting picture for me because I took this April 2003 and it hasn't come out so well on this projection. Colours are a bit washed out. But if you look right in the centre, you'll see what's called a sundog. And you may have seen these where an angle of 22.5 degrees from the disk of the sun, you'll get ice crystals will reflect the light to the viewer. But I was taking it for the sundog. I never even noticed these trails. This is before I was thinking about chemtrails. So you can see these things and not see them at the same time. And so I've called it chemtrail blindness or trail blindness. And this was from, we had a day in 2007, 18th of October. I've got that documented on my website. We actually got the satellite photographs and we got Keighley, Hertfordshire. I've got a load more, Leeds, Derby, a couple of other places. I've got a page on my website with more pictures. Ireland. Okay. I actually didn't repeat the slide there. This is another one from 25th of March. My friend in Empsey took this and sent it to me. Suggestions of a grid again. This is Yorkshire. Paris. Cross. This is the one that really woke me up, which I took, see the date there. Literally working on the computer, doing emails, usual thing. Looked out the window, there it was. There it was. Thought, blimey. And there are 9 intersecting trails. Now these things are only meant to persist for a couple of minutes. So how can it be that we had all these lines, these aircraft coming over my house within just a few minutes and intersecting at right angles, over here? What the hell was going on? And this is when I started writing a few letters. 9, I think it might even be 10. 9 separate trails, several of them intersecting. And then the other peculiar effect that people have alerted me to as well, and I've seen these, you can see here, we've got these shadow effects. So you see the trail, and then the trail seems to sort of just disappear, and you get a shadow instead. It's some very strange stuff that you see. I still don't know what that is. I'll come back to this grid photo, because that's when I started asking questions, the sort of sunset grid, as I call it. Again, more examples. Dave Ellis took this, 2010. What are these semicircular trails with things going off here? Why just these semicircles? This was at Blaenau and Festiniog, down near Llanberis. And the circle phenomenon, that's a newer one. Circles. Humberside, I took a part. Well, this is a partial circle here. I was driving along over the Humber Bridge, saw this, got my camera out while I was driving. You can see the reflection of the lens in the window. Edinburgh, 2010. A chap in the Pyrenees, he sent me a whole sequence. Harrogate, 2007. Then we have this extraordinary picture from 2 years ago, alleged to be a NATO aircraft on an exercise. Oh really? What was it doing? What exercise involved it flying in a circle, leaving a trail? Huh? No answers. No real answers. That's from a Louth leader. Michael Keng took that picture. And on the same day, Kidderminster. Circles over Kidderminster. Exactly the same day. And indeed, this isn't very clear because I took it on my little old phone. It's only a 2 megapixel camera, not very good quality. Fairly early in the morning, about 8 o'clock, and I was against the light. You can see a bit of the circle there and a little bit here. That was over Nottingham. Same day. Same day. So we had circles of trails, and I received reports from 2 other locations, 16th of January 2012, of circular contrails. What's that about? Why are all these planes flying in circles on the same morning of the same day? What is going on? Another date, 29th of November 2012, that was near Hendon. Richard Hall sent me that picture that somebody sent to him. Again, these sort of semicircles or circles, photoed by Amy Wild. Grimsby, what's going on there? Remember, this is all normal air traffic according to these deniers, that there's something going on. What you're seeing here is normal air traffic, according to some people. And Ashted, UK. And the gentleman in the audience took this and sent me that, gave me this last time I was here. It's like this weird spiral trail. God knows what caused that. And this was sent to me just yesterday. Just yesterday somebody sent me this. And I like the description. They said they watched this being done yesterday afternoon. You can see 3 o'clock. And Chris Marsh, he said it was like the Tholian web on Star Trek, if anyone remembers that episode. The Tholian web. And I know what he means because I remember that episode. So what the hell is going on? More anomalies. Again, this is not very clear. This is actually a rainbow, but it's a straight line. This is a straight line at an angle. I've got all these on my website, and these sort of sunbeams coming through it. This persisted for about 20 minutes. 20 minutes. This was in the same place. It's weird. 2009. Why are these clouds kind of, there's a focal point down towards the horizon. If you look at the lines, they're all focused down to the horizon. What's that about? Why are we getting these straight lines? Why is the geometry in the clouds? Huh? This is not right. Same here. This was outside the school where my son and daughter go to. This was June 2009. It's a linear cloud bank. No cloud. There's a trail there, look. Cloud here. And I've got another one. Linear cloud bank. That is a ruler straight edge line of cloud. Huh? Christmas Day 2007. What the hell is going on? Okay. Well, I'm going to skip over these because I think it's clear from that we're not looking at just contrails. Or even if they are just contrails, they're in patterns that contrails shouldn't be in. Something else going on. Broken trails, that's from Dave Ellis again, similar to the one, you've got the shadow effect here. Now, I'm going to play a little clip here. This is an aerial, allegedly, what this is a KC-10 military aircraft on a mission, and I'm going to play a little video clip. So you see the trail being switched, or apparently being switched on and off. And I'm going to talk about this. The trail. And then it comes now start again.
You see him spraying that chemtrail?
Yep. Good thing we're above it.
I know.
Otherwise we'd be dead right now.
I'm gonna put this on YouTube.
Video it right now? Oh god, no video right now.
It's like it's spraying out of the top of his wings.
Don't do any evidence.
Now, it's an interesting piece of video, isn't it? This particular person, they call themselves KC10 FE, I think. That was their YouTube name. They posted this YouTube clip, said, look, all you chemtrail people, this is proof that this is the proof you've been waiting for. And there was a big, usual reposts everywhere. Oh, everyone's going crazy over it. But then he said, no, it's not what you think it is. And he deleted the video off YouTube and he said, no, it was just a prank. I don't think this really is chemtrails. It's just a prank. But it looks like it really has been filmed, from within an aircraft. So somebody has deliberately filmed this. What I think you're seeing there, I don't think it's not what you call a chemtrail. If you watch the video again, you'll see that the plane is going through the tops of clouds. And I think that indeed the moisture level is changing. And that's why the trail appears to be going on and off. Because this really is a condensation trail. And so this was essentially a bit of disinformation put out to trick people. Because whoever filmed this, if they were truly filming it on a secret military mission, as they'd sort of claimed, they could have lost their, they could have been disciplined for that. And I wrote to the guy on YouTube and I said, can you tell us where you were flying, what mission you're on, what your rank is? No information, he wouldn't give any information. So I couldn't get any more information. It's a bit of a strange prank prank to play if you're at risk of losing your job, though. And then we've got this one, which is by a YouTube user, Third Idea. This is an interesting clip. This does look more like real spraying, but it's a prop plane, not a jet. So that you could argue that that does look like some chemical spraying. The videos of this are fairly few and far between compared to the amount of spraying that some people claim, you know, we're being subjected to. I'll get to that, hopefully. So I'm not really sure what's going on in that video, but I would agree that that plane seems to be at too low an altitude to be putting out a trail which forms. One thing I should have said is that, and I didn't, is that condensation trails should only form above about 26,000 feet. So when the plane is above 26,000 feet, that's when the trails form. If the plane is below that, you shouldn't see any trail because the air is warm enough for the water vapour not to condense and form a condensation cloud. That's if you believe what's in the sort of textbooks and everything. So again, more pictures. This was taken by somebody on a private plane. No, they were on a passenger flight, I think. It was a small jet though. And you get these weird shadow effects here. Yeah, I'm just going to perhaps play a very brief bit of this clip because it goes on for several minutes. And
tonight, a community in the San Bernardino Mountains has a real mystery on its hands. The official explanation here is that jet contrails are causing strange lines in the sky and that it's pollen making people sick on the ground. But others are convinced it is something else, and they ask, is the government experimenting with our weather?
There was a huge dust cloud.
Longtime Cedar Glen resident Gretchen Sherman says she has never seen anything like it.
How big was it? Oh, it covered the entire Cedar Glen area.
A cloud of dust, leaving a sticky yellow slime all over her car. It happened again last February, and calls began pouring into the local Alpenhorn newspaper.
And they had a tremendous upsurge of children that were not going to school at that time.
Pharmacist Ed Burrows says it is the most mysterious illness he's seen in 22 years on the mountain.
A lot of eye infection problems, upper respiratory problems, nosebleeds.
The nearby March Air Force Base say it didn't come from them. Others said it was a pollen cloud. The Department of Health found a yellowish tint on a tissue submitted for testing. But, quote, there was no sign of any biological form, such as cedar pollen, and the test was ruled inconclusive. And it wasn't long before things ballooned into a sky-high mystery. The story is not just here in Crestline in the alleged yellow cloud. People say the government is up there in airplanes spraying all kinds of chemicals to change or manipulate the weather, leaving what you see there, and they call that a chemtrail. So what I look up there and I think are contrails, you're telling me, are chemtrails?
Yes, that a contrail would be dissipated by now.
It would?
Yes, it would.
Chemtrails. On the internet, they are cited as proof of the government creating clouds to combat global warming. In response, the Air Force says that, quote, there is no such thing as a chemtrail. The actual contrails are a safe and natural phenomenon. And that people are seeing more contrails simply because there are more jets forming large clouds, depending on weather conditions, as in this video of alleged chemtrails shot near San Francisco.
I think these are contrails.
Professor Gregory Benford of UC Irvine works with the Department of Energy on weather research.
That's very odd. They could be very large contrails.
He says the DOE doesn't know of any jets spraying chemicals to affect the weather. However, he says we will probably see it in the near future.
You've got to, in a sense, engineer all these so you get the right kind of clouds for the effects we want.
It is called geoengineering, fighting global warming by putting a chemical dust in the atmosphere and reflecting harmful radiation back into space.
You could use barium oxide, for example, which makes big fluffy clouds. You could use tiny little bits of aluminum, which is benign in the environment, and essentially manage the climate.
And what I found was unusual spiking since the early 1990s in barium, aluminum.
But Rosalind Peterson of California Skywatch says health department records show a sharp increase in both chemicals in the water supply of Northern California, dating from the time the huge contrails first appeared over her home in Mendocino County.
What's the significance of the barium and the aluminum?
I went and got all the tests, and all these things in the same test would be up way over state and federal standards. It had to be airborne, because how could it get to such diverse regions of our county? We have jets going in every direction. X's, east, west, north, south, circles. There is something going on in the air. I don't know exactly what, but I think there's some experimentation.
Is it legal?
I don't know because we haven't had a public discussion.
But what is unknown today may be actual fact tomorrow, thanks to a bill soon to be voted on in the U.S. Senate, a Weather Modification Act, calling for research in, quote, attempting to change or control by artificial methods the natural development of atmospheric cloud forms.
Doesn't it seem to you that they're going to be doing it in the future for sure?
Yes. And if they are, I want to know about it.
In the meantime, a lot of people are wondering if they'll ever get clear skies and a clear answer.
The legislation is there, therefore somebody's thinking about this. How does this make sense?
I don't know, maybe they're practicing?
Over Cedar Glen, over Arrowhead.
I guess you have to try it out before you use it. I'm not sure.
Well, you be the judge. We'll keep you posted on anything further on this story, and there will be more, that's for sure. More information on the weather modification proposals, check on our website, nbc4.tv.
So that clip brought in a number of issues there. One is the barium and aluminium, which people are claiming is in the water and it's affecting people and poisoning people. Well, this is, again, something I've tried to get a grasp on, but it's actually very difficult because if you think of the amount of trails that we see, then we don't really see the widespread metal poisoning, which I think some people are claiming. That's my problem with it. And there are only a few people talking about that side of things. And the evidence is fairly thin, I think. But I'm not denying that it's happening. Going back to this grid picture here that I showed before, when I saw that, I decided that I'd write a few letters. It took me a while to get to do this, but you know, it was mentioned in that clip there, in the news clip that I just showed, that you tend to get obviously a stock response. You tend to get just a stock response about this. If you write to the Environmental Protection Agency in the US, several people have done this and they get the response. The EPA is not involved in or aware of any application of aerial spraying of chemical, biological or toxic substances as claimed by your past correspondence or on the above or other websites. The agency takes very seriously its mission to protect human health. Similarly with the Air Force, the term chemtrail is a hoax, began circulating approximately 4 years ago, which asserts the government is involved in a joint federal program of covert spraying of the general public. The chemtrails are most often described as unusual contrails or contrail patterns seen coming from military and civilian aircraft. The chemtrail hoax, interesting word, has been investigated and refuted by many established and accredited universities, scientific organisations and major media publications. But I think if you were to read the rest of this letter, it doesn't tell you which ones. No universities, no publications. Yeah, so I sort of, back in 2007, I mean, I've been looking at this for years now, and I compiled some of this information into a report, the best information I had at the time, and I sent it to these various agencies, Department of Environment, Civil Aviation Authority, Royal Air Force, Greenpeace, World Wildlife Fund and others, and you can still download this report from my website. And I ended up getting these responses from the Department of for Transport, and this chap at the Department of Transport, he was all right. He sent me this link to a paper called Contrail Formation by Professor Ulrich Schumann of the Institute of Atmospheric Physics. And the problem with this paper was that this 26-page study included no stated maximum figure of contrail persistence. It didn't say, oh, well, they can hang around for half an hour or an hour, as some people have measured. It talks about contrail formation being linked to cirrus cloud formation. Cirrus is a type of high cloud. But then it says there's no proven link between contrails and cirrus clouds. It does indeed discuss persistent contrails, but it does not explain why they form, and the duration of their persistence is not discussed in any detail or with any empirical data. And what I tried to do, as you'll see later, is I tried to do some time-lapse photography, to see how long these things were lasting. I'll come to that in a bit, but I measured on satellite images chemtrails that were over 300, or persistent jet trails, whatever you want to call them. They were 300 kilometres long. I put this into the report. Now, this paper said that the maximum quoted size for a region of ice supersaturation, which was his alleged idea, when a plane flew into an area of ice supersaturation, that's when you would get the trails formed. The maximum size would be 150 kilometres. But I measured these things at 300 kilometres long. So that was too big for his ice supersaturation theory. And I just measured this on publicly available images. That was me. I'm not a scientist. I don't get paid for this research. He was, this Ulrich Schumann was. So why can't he measure these pictures and use it to support or refute his theory? Same old problem. And they didn't do any time-lapse studies in this paper, which I'd done and I've continued to do. And I sent all this back to Roger Worth, and he just wrote, there is simply no evidence of unknown aerosols being covertly introduced, and to claim otherwise is distorting the facts. Well, if you want to ignore all this, I mean, I'm not saying this is all toxic spray, but there is clearly something going on. If you're going to ignore this, then, it's all in a day's work for some people to just fob this off and say, forget about it. Greenpeace and World Wildlife Fund, not interested. Would not take any interest in this. And they said, Greenpeace, they just said, oh, we don't have any resources to look at this. Well, do you have a lunch break? Go out and look at the sky in your lunch break. There's your resource. That's a start, isn't it? And I just, I dropped out as a Greenpeace supporter. Then I knew they were just controlled opposition. Some people have done freedom of information responses. CAA, this was the CAA. Because what I wrote, and eventually I had to answer my own question ultimately, I wanted to know what flights had caused these lines, basically. And if you are an aircraft, you have to file a flight plan. So somebody should have known what flights caused these trails. And I wrote to the Civil Aviation Authority to ask them which flights, and I gave them the dates and the times. Oh, sorry, we don't have that information. So they don't have a database of these flights. But I'm going to come back to that. And I wrote to the airport, the East Midlands Airport, and they said that they're only interested in traffic below 15,000 feet, because that's what can be coming into land. Above 15,000 feet, over an airport, it's just going over, so they just want to forget about it. They're not interested in that. Yeah, this was the one I wrote to East Midlands Airport, and that's the response I got. It's pretty much all on my website, if anyone wants to look. This is going back a few years. So, a few years passed, really, and I was still interested. A lot of people were saying various things. Are commercial aircraft involved in making these trails? Some people are claiming they were. Some people are claiming they were all, sort of masquerading as civilian aircraft and really the military. All kinds of things being said. So what I wanted to do was, I think it was around about 2006, I discovered you could buy an off-the-shelf product, and it was essentially a radar detector. Well, it's like a virtual radar. We call it the SBS-1. This isn't an SBS-1. This is a ANAV radar box. What turns out is that there's a signalling system used by all modern aircraft, and it's called Automatic Dependence Surveillance Broadcast, I think, ADSB. And you can build a receiver to pick up these signals, and then you can plug that receiver into your computer, your personal computer, and on the computer you can identify the registration number of the aircraft, the type of aircraft, the airline, the airspeed, the altitude, the bearing, and the source and destination of the flight. Right? So I decided in early 2010 or late 2009, I decided to shell out 400 quid of my own money to buy one of these. And after several weeks and months of monitoring, and I've done a whole video about this, I've got this on DVD, I was able to pick up 2 flights, and I photographed them and videoed them, and one flight was leaving a long persistent trail and the other wasn't. All right? And these were both EasyJet domestic UK flights, one flying from Luton to Glasgow, one flying from Stansted to Edinburgh. And you can see one was, the height I picked it up at was 32,525 feet, and the other one was 32,900. And only, less, about 100 feet variation in each of these. Exactly the same type of aircraft, A39111. This is what the radar box gave me. In other words, I was looking on my laptop screen, the radar box was plugged in and running, and this was the information it gave to me. So I could see that these were the exact same aircraft, and they were travelling at nearly the same speed, almost an identical speed. Same height, within reason, within a few hundred feet. Within a few hundred feet, basically. And that one was leaving a long trail, 1632, and the one at 1724 was a short trail. I've made a video of this, it's all on my website. So I ended up, I identified from the position in the sky. That was a short trail one, this was the long trail one. So we've got a problem, Houston, here, because we've got 2 flights, same airline, same type of aircraft, same height, essentially, or within 500 feet. One's leaving a trail and one isn't. Why would that be? So I wrote to EasyJet. This is the snapshot of the AirNav radar readout. And that was the other one. So that's just to show you the evidence from that. I wrote to EasyJet and said, please tell me why this plane was leaving a trail and this one wasn't. I gave them all the details, the aircraft number and everything. I apologise, but I am unable to answer your operational query. That was the response. So, what else can you do? Who wouldn't respond? Well, I'll tell you what I did. Later on, after, again, a few more years had passed, this was, this eventually came to me as an idea in 2013, and I developed something, or kind of, not all of it, but the AirNav radar box, as I say, was 400 quid, and you needed to plug it into a laptop and leave the laptop running 24/7. So if you wanted to track aircraft, you had to leave it running 24/7. And this laptop that I had, I couldn't really leave it on all the time because it was actually the laptop I used to give talks. So I was needing to take it. So I couldn't leave it running for more than 3 or 4 days at a time. So I needed something better. I also needed a way of logging all the aircraft that were above a certain height. Anyway, there were all sorts of problems with that. So I found out in 2013 that you could get a TV dongle. This actually receives Freeview TV. You've got the Raspberry Pi, which is a single board computer, which costs about 25 quid. You can plug it in, you put an SD card into it, which is the same that goes in your digital camera. You download from some software which has already been written, and it will basically reprogram this dongle here to pick up the ADSB messages and put them on a web page. So you basically plug this in, put the software on from the internet, spin it up, connect it to your, your router and your network at home, log on to it, and you can see the aircraft tracks much as on the other one. In other words, you can get a display similar to this, so you can see where the aircraft are going. But the software that ran on here was written in a language called C. And guess what? I did C programming for 5 years for my living. So I thought, I can reprogram this to do what I want. And I left it running. And this is basically a diagram of the system that I developed, or not all of it, but I added on. So you've got the Raspberry Pi in the middle here. You've got a digital camera, which costs about 20 quid. You plug that in. So what can you do? You can get the Raspberry Pi to photograph the sky and track the aircraft simultaneously. And what can you also do? You can get the Raspberry Pi to automatically generate time-lapse movies at the end of every day. And you can get it to take pictures of the sky between sunset and sunrise, or the other way around, sunrise and sunset. All the software for that is available. I just put it in there. So I got a network of about 5 of these across the UK, running 24/7, and downloading all the data from all the aircraft counts, time-lapse videos. It was all downloaded to my Raspberry Pi, which was also running as my tracker at my house. And I ran these for a period of about 6 months. I've got a whole DVD about this. So I was able to count all the aircraft that were over 24,000 feet. I could count the number of aircraft that this thing detected going over my house over 24,000 feet, and I could also get pictures of the sky for that day. So I could tie up the number of aircraft detected with a visual record of the sky. All right, and I've got all this in a database. This is one of the charts. I wrote the software to generate this chart. So the original software which decoded the TV dongle, which is the hard bit, it didn't have any of this tracking. I wrote all of this. Just downloaded a Unix graphics library, worked out what you needed to do, and these are all the aircraft from, where is this? That's a weather map, logged onto it, so I was tracking all the weather, and this was, trying to remember which one this was. Oh, I haven't put the postcode on there, but yeah. So I knew, I could track all the aircraft, so I could match up, because north is at the top. Obviously, it's just compass, compass orientation, north, south, east, west. So I could match up from the video which planes had created which trails. I could do it retrospectively. So in other words, I could leave this running for weeks and then go back, spend a day going through all the data, match it all up. My objective, basically, was to see if you get a day's, you've seen these days where you get massive amounts of trails. Does that correspond to picking up more aircraft? That was simply the main thing I wanted to do. I count the number of aircraft that have gone over my house or the other houses here, look at the video, when I've got trails, can I say, right, that day we've got loads of trails, look at my database, oh, I've got loads of aircraft, have we? Or haven't we? That was my basic objective. Nobody's ever tried to do that before. This was the first. No one in the world has ever tried to do that before, to my knowledge. Not to both track the aircraft and count and track the sky as well, or at least part of the sky. So yeah, I had one at my house, Derby. People probably know I live near Derby. SN5. This was fairly near Bristol Airport. NE16 was actually Richard Hall that hosted that for me. Not too far from here, Royington and the Isle of Wight. And I had a good data set. I had a good lot of data. Right? It wasn't just my house. I ended up with, I think, about 30,000 observations, something like that. So I was trying to literally have a scientific approach to this. The counts that I was counting with the tracker set up, I want to count the planes detected, count the planes located, because you find out when you look at this ADSB, the signalling system, only some of the planes tell you where they are. Only some of them broadcast their latitude and longitude. Others will only broadcast their altitude, and that's about it, and their speed. I wanted to count the number of planes that were actually above 24,000, 25,000 feet, because they're the only ones I'm interested in, because they're the ones that have got the potential to create trails. And then I also want to count planes which were in 25 miles of the tracker's location, because you can't really see much further than that. If you see a plane way up in the sky, it's probably going to be about 10, 12 miles away, 15 miles perhaps. And then I wanted to count the number of planes that were above the trail altitude and within 25 miles. Right? It's quite complicated, but I carefully considered this, and I developed this over a period of 6 months, the software and stuff. So let's see if this video will play. Now, so I was able over a period of 6 months to look at the time-lapse videos and look when the trails were being created. Now, you've got a problem, because the British weather is a bit rubbish, as you know. And we get a lot of cloudy days. So I'd run the time-lapse video and it'd just be all cloudy. So I couldn't make any trail observations from that. It's no good. So over a period of time I had to work out a way for comparing the days with trails to the days with no trails, because there were some days totally blue sky for 7-8 hours of the day, absolutely no trails at all, and then the next day you get loads of trails. But by comparing the days with trails to the days with no trails, I was able to show that there's no clear link between the detected levels of air traffic and the number of trails. Looking at some figures in isolation, you'll see I've written all this up. It is complicated, but it is, I would call it a scientific study, basically. It could be argued that there is a lower amount of detected air traffic on days of trailing. That was a surprising conclusion that I found, that the level of aircraft detected on days with trails was, on many occasions, was lower. Right? This result would therefore tend to disprove a general statement that trailing is seen because of increased levels of air traffic. That's not what I found.
Have you seen the video where there's a UPS aircraft nearly crashes into two jet trailers in the States, but there's no transponders on them?
Right, I have seen that video and I'm not sure what to make of it. That is an interesting video. So, I don't know, maybe we have got aircraft that are haven't got this transponders going and stuff. I've not been able to get that far with that, but what I've essentially been able to prove from the results that I've got is there is no clear link between the and I use the word detectable carefully, air traffic and the number of trails that you see. And I've got a whole database that ran for 6 months. It was sometimes difficult to identify which flights left trails. Only a maximum of about 50% could be located. In other words, when you're looking at these traces that I've got, to try and identify which plane made that is not always easy, because the camera image only covers a small portion of the sky. You've only got about, I don't know, probably less than a 20th of the sky. So you've got to be lucky that this trail goes in front of your camera and then you pick it on the tracker as well. And what I also wanted to know is that, as I mentioned earlier on, there is some aircraft that broadcast their altitude but not their position. So you can only tell that they're within range of the receiver, you can't tell where they are. So I calculated a real-time percentage figure between the number of aircraft detected and the number of aircraft that have their position broadcast. In other words, you can tell where the aircraft is. Because I was wondering whether we were getting more aircraft, on these training days we're going to get loads of aircraft, but they weren't telling you where they were. They weren't giving you the latitude and longitude. I wondered if that was the case. So I calculated this in real time in the software, but there was no difference. So we didn't seem to have more clandestine aircraft or aircraft which weren't located on the trailing days compared to the no trailing days. So that didn't bear up. Now, I've got, I'll try and get that video to play somewhere if I can, but the Warrington tracker, I got this amazing video from the 25th of November, and I got loads of grids. I think that was the video I was trying to play, and I'll try and get that back if I can, and play it after the interval. I was going to have a break in a minute. And you can see, if you look at these charts that I made from software, you can see that the trails do cross over. You can see the aircraft trails do cross over. But they don't form grids with right angles. They'll form other patterns of crossing trails, but I don't have any of those. If I go back a few slides, if I can. If I go back a few slides, these charts that I made, you see there's no grids on there. And I did have a video from the 25th of November where I was getting grids on the video. I'll try and show you it. But there were no grids on the chart. Do you see what I mean? There was no track of grids on this corresponding chart, not at any time. So, I was trying to get some raw information which nobody else was giving me, and I did essentially get some, but it's inconclusive. And on this 25th of November one, again, we can see both persistent and non-persistent trails at the same time in the sky. And this research is still ongoing. I've got 2 trackers running currently. I'm not really running any in the UK. I want to get one abroad if I can. Somebody was going to help me out with that, but then they seem to fade out. There's definitely more, I could do more with these trackers and see if there's repeat results in another country, look at the numbers of aircraft, look at the time-lapse video from other countries. We could also use super zoom cameras, such as the SX50, the FZ72, Panasonic one, because you can get quite a good shot of the aircraft from the ground with these 50 times and 60 times zoom lenses. I'd also like to tie it up with satellite images as well, to see what we can see on those. But all that I just have not had the time to do. As you know, I'm into a lot of other things. Basically, this has been quite a time-consuming bit of a research, as you can imagine. If people want more information about it, I've got a whole DVD there about how I did it. I can give people copies of the software. I can tell them how to make a tracker if they want. It's all publicly available stuff. It costs you about 80 quid, something like that. So if people did want to take this up themselves, I can show them how to do it. You've got to have a bit of technical knowledge, but not too much. I've got other people to run them for me. So I think we're probably, it's 9 o'clock now, so I think we're going to have a bit of a break, and then we'll go on and look a bit more about what's supposedly in chemtrails and all the other stuff. Thanks very much for listening.